Well, the late game on Saturday, Manchester United 2, Nottingham Forest 3. Janusz, Michallik, is it really a big shock that the team that's now in 5th place in the Premier League has beaten the team in 13th place?
Well, yeah, if you look at the table, it isn't, right? I mean, but you have to say that Forest had a little bit of a blip, haven't they? Not against anybody, but I mean, 3 losses recently. Arsenal, who was there? Newcastle, and Manchester City. It can happen to anybody, but it's still a shock because it's at home. This is another loss at home for Manchester United over the years. That has been a place where teams were afraid to come in. That hasn't been the case for a long time. We know it. We've got to get used to it. I think we've gotten used to it to a degree because this place has been a graveyard for managers as of late since Sir Alex Ferguson has left. So obviously a lot of changes. New manager. It's a bad loss. It's a bad loss, especially the way it came about. Right. I mean, you can see 2 goals in each half like that. Then show a lot of spirit because I thought Manchester United showed spirit in coming back, but it was a little bit too much. The 3rd goal, they just couldn't overcome.
You want to be in a position where you can score 1 goal and get 3 points. The fact they've scored 2 goals and got 0 points, there's clearly a defensive deficiency. Now, it's 7 goals now they've conceded from corners this season, Manchester United, and they conceded in about 90 seconds to Milenkovic. The problem is they also conceded 2 a few days ago against Arsenal. So we've seen a back 4 at Old Trafford this season under Erik ten Hag. We've now got a back 3, but it's the same issues. Why is this happening? You're a former defender. Why are they allowing goals to be scored so easily from corner kicks?
Yeah, I mean, well, inconsistency of a lineup, that's for sure. Set pieces to me are individual, regardless how teams play. We know these days that it's still, it's zone, it's man for man, it's combination of the 2, right? I mean, if you look at Milenkovic, 6'5" against Lisandro Martinez to start with, that's not a fair fight, right? There's only so much you can ask for it. I don't know why that happened. Was that written out like that? Was that his responsibility? Who knows? He was the closest one, and yes, we asked him to win it. Well, I'll tell you from experience, it's not always easy in that situation, right? Then you have Euro, who just got thrown in basically first time in the starting lineup, right? Played a little bit in the last game. I mean, he's tall enough. He should have done better, but obviously didn't see one of the best in the business when it comes to finishing. Certainly in the air, and Chris Wood. I mean, what a header that was. But many that contributed to these goals. And then just a big question right now. Ruben Amorim comes in. He continues to send messages, right? He's been lowering expectation. He said just this past week, right? I'm trying to read here. We will have difficult times and we will get found out. Well, they are getting found out. And I'll tell you this. I mean, he is in the process of rebuilding this team. But you still have to maintain a standard. And so now, last 2 games, that doesn't look good. It's not a great start. Obviously, he's getting plenty of benefit. But the bottom line is, and I've said that under Ten Hag, who promised a lot and didn't deliver, at least lower expectations here. He's kind of saying this is going to be deep. We're going to dig deep to get Manchester United back to their best. But as I've said it before, I continue to pound. There's just not enough good players here. There just isn't. Player for player, the same players that we talk about. Marcus Rashford, Højlund's been scoring, but is he the sort of player that's going to lead United under any manager? I doubt it. Garnacho, same thing. We kind of get excited about Garnacho because he creates a lot of movement, but where does that lead, right? I mean, I look at him. He's 20. Everybody seems to think that is he the best of the rest? I mean, I look at 20. I look at Jamal Musiala and Bellingham. And you tell me, I mean, is he ever going to get near sort of players like him? I just picked the 2, and maybe it's lazy on my part. I could probably think of other players as well. So I just think going deeper, that back 3 is not good enough. Euro's a big risk. I don't know why he took it. Maybe Amorim is trying to show his players that everybody's going to be a big part. Nobody's a secret cow here, but I think I would have played Mazraoui there to start with, give him a little bit of time to come back. Decision with Bruno Fernandes. Again, is it the one, Mark, because he wants to show that everybody's important, nobody's bigger than it? I don't know, but you're behind, right? I mean, we can talk if he made a mistake, not just him, because Euro was part of that too, but we probably don't have time to break that down. But reacted, right, and it was very important afterwards. So I think that was a big risk, and I think this was a mistake on Amorim's part.
I want to give you an analogy here. Ruben Amorim is an award-winning interior designer, but he's been told he's not allowed to spend any money this month. He can't start spending money until January the 1st. He's got to work with what he has. He's got to try and turn this house into something that's more than livable, it's enjoyable, and people enjoy coming to the house again because they see good results because he's such a good interior designer. That's basically what he is right now as a football manager. He's got to deal with what he has. He can't make any changes as far as personnel are concerned until January comes. But the other thing is as well, you can't just say, right, you're surplus to requirements, go. Someone's going to take you. So there's going to have to be an outlay before there's incomings as far as money is concerned for players that they sell. And January's not an easy window to try and sell players if you're Manchester United, because people know that they probably have to sell a number of players. So Amorim's doing the best with what he can, and change takes time. And as easy as this could be a kicking while them down exercise with Manchester United, I actually thought they responded well to the concession of the opening goal. And Ugarte and Bruno were involved. There was a decent passage of play that led to the equalising goal. And you just felt after that, right, let's see what they've got now. Let's see if they can kick on. Did Manchester United kick on enough for you after they got back on level terms in the 18th minute?
Yeah, I mean, part of it, it's not even that, he said it's all about the basics. He really said that. And I believe in that. Although today is not a good example of the simple basics, right? I mean, when you look at set pieces, when you look at conceding early in each half, those are the basics, right? Defensive. I just think, one of the first things is to rein players in, because, when you think about it and you look at this lineup, when I see goals like this, the way they were conceded, right? It tells me of lack of experience. It tells me young players that almost want to do too much. And I'll tell you why. Because the first two goals, obviously we know the managers and the players themselves, we always tell ourselves, guys, first minute or two, make sure everybody concentrates before the game halftime, right? So these things were said by the players, by the managers, all of that. And if you remember the start, the first, because it was a minute 30, minute 50, obviously Manchester United, I don't want to say against the run of play, but they started well. But that's just it. You have lack of experience because you have these young players that don't understand the balance, don't understand that you have to work yourself into the game. There's going to be a time to throw yourself going forward. So when you look at players like Dalot, I mean, he just wants to go forward all the time. I actually like him. I think he's a decent player, but he certainly is lacking that fine line of knowing when to do it and when not to do it, whatever it may be, when to stay, when to go, right? If you look at Ahmad, he's certainly one that throws himself forward. Garnacho, my goodness, that's all he really wants to do, right? Just wants to attack. Mainu was doing that as well. These are young players that are inexperienced. And then you may tell me, well, there are a couple of more experienced players. But, it's a big ask for Bruno Fernandes or, when you look around, it's, who really is experienced there. When Casemiro played, but he wasn't there. It's very, very difficult when you see these players ahead just bombing forward from the get-go because they want to set themselves. And great teams and good players, even the younger ones, kind of know that the game truly really is 90 minutes plus, right? That you can start well, but you don't have to put yourself at risk at all times. And go and watch these goals, the first 2 minutes. That's really what it was. You can understand it, Mark, a little bit, the first half, because you're playing at home. You kind of got this new spirit, new manager. But still, it seems to me that the imbalance and, Forest were great on the break. And you could have driven a truck through the middle of that pitch, by the way. I mean, it was just so much room.
The opening goal scored inside 2 minutes of the first half. Forest's second goal is scored 2 minutes inside the second half. It's one of these, Janusz, watching on TV, you're paying attention. You're like, oh, I wonder who that took a deflection of because it's wrong-footed, the goalkeeper. then you see the angle from behind and you're like, what is Onana doing here? How big an upgrade is he, if at all, on David De Gea? We're still there. We're still talking about this.
I don't think Onana is the one that you go to. I mean, he of all the players under the managers, I mean, he's been strong. I mean, this is one of those.
Which is fine, but this is an error. You can't say this is not an error. This is a shocker.
But I mean, that's going back to what I was saying, because I watched this, and maybe because I'm a defender, I've done this in the past, unfortunately, for myself. But as much as you think, for example, that goal that you just mentioned, right, building out of the back. You have Euro, who's just gotten back, who wants to play, right? Bruno Fernandes, Euro got himself ahead of the play. He almost forced Bruno Fernandes into that mistake, because when you build that, you play it. You want to play 1-2. You want to continue to support Bruno back to goal, 25 yards away from your own goal, whatever that was. You have to be smart. Once you give that ball, you can't get ahead of it. He was just about even. And the moment Bruno takes that touch, you could see why Bruno wanted to force that. So those are the little mistakes when you have these players that just gotten there, like Euro, who was injured half the time and hasn't really played himself in. And then in the end, that kind of multiplies itself, really, because you get that strike and Onana kind of gets wrong-footed. Maybe he was trying to read that strike a little bit too early, leaning towards the right. And, I mean, Gibbs-White was just as surprised as everybody else that went in the back of the net. So what I will tell you is we all know how De Gea was dealt with. We all know the issues he's had when he first got there, right? I mean, it's not like De Gea was right away the greatest goalkeeper ever for them. He's going to be probably ultimately a legend of the club in a way. Because he's delivered a lot for them. But Onana is probably one of the last players that I would have an issue with over the season.
Yeah, I get that. This is just an individual effort which beats a goalkeeper who should be saving it. That's the bottom line. And it puts them behind the 8 ball. And then 7 minutes later, it's Gibbs-White with the delivery. And this isn't on Onana. I mean, I think you've got De Ligt and I think you've got Martinez that were the two that kind of one leaves it for the other. It's one of those looping headers that Chris Wood does exactly what he should do. He puts it back across goal into an area where he's hopeful that something happens, and it did. So is this more, if you stop the cross, the goal doesn't happen? Are we looking that far back in the move, or are we looking at the centre-backs who kind of left it to each other here?
Well, yes, because there was a couple of crosses, right? Remember, the first one where Chris Wood wanted it, was frustrated that didn't get to him the way he wanted, then they get a second chance. So absolutely, you have to look at the players and say to yourself, how can they have 2 free crosses like that? But then, as much as you can blame Lisandro Martinez on Milinkovic's goal. This is Euro. I mean, he's big enough, he's tall enough, right? He loses sight of Chris Wood. And by the way, it was a soft touch because it was high, it was a little bit behind, it was guided, it didn't have a lot of power. And at the very least, Euro has to put a body on him, just a little bit of a push, so that header is not technically perfect like that. So that's on Euro for me. Now we can say, could Martinez maybe try to attack the ball or do something about it to prevent it from going, because that ball was kind of crying on its way in, right? Because of the lack of power. But I put that on the cross because it was 2. 1 you can excuse sort of, because not every cross can be stopped, by the way, even if you try to pressure. But this one for me is on Euro.
Okay, so Forest are 3-1 up, and 7 minutes later, again, good reaction from Manchester United. They had to have a reaction, and they got one, and they made it 3-2. Bruno Fernandes. And look, if you've just made an error, the best thing you can do is rectify that in the best way possible, putting the ball in the back of the net. So we're just after the hour mark. United have narrowed the deficit to just 1 goal again, and there's still a long time to go. So rather than kind of just analyse the Bruno Fernandes goal, decent strike, hits across the goalkeeper, it goes into the back of the net. Should Manchester United fans and Manchester United boss Ruben Amorim have expected more after that? Because Forest became a little bit more withdrawn, made a few changes as well. But United had a few good looks, close things.
Well, Bruno Fernandes sells Bruno Fernandes was it a free kick, right? I mean,
Yeah,
it's
the free kick that he tips onto the bar. Yeah, there's a lot
yeah,
going on.
and there was a deflection on the way
There
as
was,
well.
yeah.
That's an unbelievable save, goes off the crossbar. So they close. Of course, you have to have that expectations. The substitutions, as I mentioned, it's a lot. It seems free willing, even not just this game, but from game to game within the games. You can see that Amorim clearly is getting everybody a look. If I had to say it, he's been, I don't know, I don't want to say given go ahead, but he's probably mentioned, said, look, I'm going to look at players. This is the only time I'm going to give him benefit of the doubt, and I'm going to be a tough guy. And but as I've said, Bruno Fernandes, for me, that substitution didn't make sense to me unless there's something that we don't know about. Of course, you always have to say that, but it just didn't make it. I mean, it's the only quality world-class player there. Bruno Fernandes can be frustrating. He has been frustrating over the years. I can also understand why he's frustrated because, very often over the months and years, he hasn't had anybody really to play with him. He's carrying the load. I've seen him play for Portugal in person recently a couple of times when they played Poland and paid attention to the other games. Completely different player. Of course, Portugal has quality. They're too deep in every position, but it's absolutely different player. Just plays because he knows he doesn't have to do anything else. So, I mean, that to me was questionable because, as I've said it, you can try things if you're Bruno Amorim, but you can't forget that you're Manchester United. And there's a still standard, and you still have to get some results in between because then the rebuild is that much easier, right? I mean, you can't be doing a rebuild when now you've lost 2 games in a row. I know he's new. I know he's going to get the benefit of the doubt. But what if that snowballs, right? Are we going to be in the same situation where now what? Hey, Ruud van Nistelrooy, come back? So that's the only point I'm making.
I get that, and I want to take that on board and move to the owner of the football club, Sir Jim Ratcliffe. Now he's given an interview with United We Stand, and this is interesting. Have a read at this, including Manchester United has become mediocre, supposed to be one of the best clubs in the world. And he's talking about various things and says we have to make some difficult and unpopular decisions. If you shy away from the difficult decisions, then nothing much is going to change. I don't think you can take issue with anything he's said, but is this a help or a hindrance for Ruben Amorim?
Well, I think it's a massive help. Nobody would have ever said that, right? For many, many years, for decades, there was never a reason to say that, right? But for, more than a decade now, since Sir Alex Ferguson has left, I think, you're almost afraid to do that because you're such a massive club. You've done everything, right? In the Premier League, you've won the Champions League, what was it? 3 times they've won? I can't remember now. But, I mean, obviously, one of the 3 biggest clubs in the world, even if they're losing, even in the last decade, still a massive, massive club. And it's not easy to make a statement like that. I don't recall anybody else making anything close to that. And I think this is good because this is something that everybody knows, but everyone was afraid to say it. So I think this is a positive. That's why I sort of look at some of the changes from game to game within the game where Ruben Amorim is doing it. That statement doesn't surprise me. And Mark, you know that I missed it somehow. I just found out just before the show as well. But, I think that have a problem first, just like anything else in the world, right? Sooner you do that, it's that much easier to maybe start from the bottom because, when you talk about Manchester United, that's where they are, by virtue of being such a big club. They're at the bottom. They've hit that, and hopefully Ruben Amorim in months or seasons to come can change that.
1968, 1999, obviously against Bayern in 2008, were their Champions League wins. Just finally, does Ruben Amorim learn more about his players in a game like that? Or is it something that he is where he is and fine, he's learned 1 or 2 things, but they move on to the next game and obviously they've got a European tie and then it's Man City. Is today in the long bigger picture maybe not a bad thing for United if he can rectify some of the ills that are currently happening at that football club?
It's not a good thing.
Not now, it's not.
It's so hard to say because of that. I mean, in his head, he probably knows who he wants. But today, it's difficult to say because Mark, properly functioning team and a massive club like Manchester United, okay, so he goes with Martinez, De Ligt, and Euro, but you normally don't change 2 center backs out of the 3, right? So, it's so hard for me. I mean, he's learning. He probably has it. We'll find that out, because I think the stability of the lineup. If you're gonna say that you're gonna do the little things first, and you're gonna telegraph the fact that we're gonna get found out, which they have been, but it's so hard to think that he doesn't have in his head, now I'm getting just about everybody healthy right in the back. Next few games, you're going to see the 3 that he truly, really wants, right? So maybe he did find out that, Euro is not ready yet, or De Ligt maybe he's not mobile enough, although I don't think he's a problem. I was surprised that Lisandro Martinez stayed the whole game. I think his, for him, it probably, the fact that he's left-footed is what saves him, because, as you know, I have never been a massive fan of his. To me, he's not very reliable. So I look at him before I look at many others. But that's just me. Maybe he works for him.
Final question, and this is all hypothetical. So January comes around, and Amorim gets 1 or 2 players that he's after, but he also signs Viktor Gyökeres from Sporting, hypothetically. What difference in Manchester United's style of play would he make if they were to get him in January?
No, nothing. I mean, he's a number 9, right? I mean, he's no different than Højlund. It's just that he's scoring goals. But he's scoring goals. And, as with any player, and there's so many great examples that we see right now. I need more than 1 seasons. You can say, look at Amorim leading the league. He was doing everything. Well, that was in Portugal. I know Gyökeres is scoring in Europe as well. He's a quality player, but again, to kind of do that year in and year out, we only have few examples of that. Players that over the course of 5, 6, 7 seasons, the Lewandowskis, the Kanes of the world. I watch Aston Villa, Ali Watkins, excellent season. This year, not so much. So let's wait and see. But it doesn't change the system of play, because it's obviously similar to that of Sporting. He's proven already that he can score both domestically and in Europe. But can he do it for Manchester United? Different way. You and I have been talking about Kylian Mbappe, who was scoring for fun, right? And he's having difficulties. So let's just wait and see, because again, Gyökeres, that's going to be the test. Can you do it at that level where you expected, by the way, to score, if not goal game, a goal every other game? Easier said than done.
So the January big signing, if there is one, has to be someone tried and tested, who's got a track record of delivering, rather than someone that had a really good season and may or may not be the next big thing.
Yeah, and there's many, there's midfield, there's other positions, I don't even know. Yeah, I mean, getting Gyökeres would help if he scores. I'm not absolutely sure that this is going to happen with Gyökeres. So that to me is unrealistic for January. That's just me guessing. Okay. I go for depth and get 2, 3, or 4 players who he thinks over the years are going to get better, who are going to be sponges, who are going to continue to respond to you as a manager and learn, and wanting to learn all of that. That to me would be more important than just get money for 1 player. There's so many deficiencies behind. So look, I mean, I don't necessarily think that, scoring has not been easy for United, but it's also, it's not like they're the worst, kind of, but they're not.
They weren't the best today, and it was Nottingham Forest.
Well, they had 2. That should be enough at home.
They didn't, because Forest had 3, and for the first time since 1994, Stan Collymore and Stuart Pearce, Nottingham Forest head back from Old Trafford with all 3 points, and a deserved win at that, if you ask their fans. The odds makers pre-game suggested that Manchester United would win this one. Well, one thing they did get right, there was a Portuguese manager in charge of the victorious side. It wasn't Amorim, though. It was Nuno Espirito Santo. Enjoy your evening, Forest fans. Bye for now.